Somebody thinks the Tensho Kaiku is totally radical. Here's your look at the Playmates toys. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles vs. Street Fighter, Michelangelo, and Chun-Li. Street Fighter celebrates its 35th anniversary in 2022, marking a historic moment for one of the most influential fighting game franchises of all time. This series charged into the scene in 1987, quickly becoming a household name around the world with its captivating gameplay and iconic characters such as Chun-Li and Ryu. Now the team will face one of their greatest challenges yet as they battle against formidable opponents from another indispensable franchise, the New York City sewer-dwelling, crime-fighting, pizza-loving Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In this iconic Versus 2-pack series, will Ryu have the skills to throw a Hadouken and take down the leader of the Turtles, Leonardo? Will Chun-Li use her fast attacks to handle the master of the nunchucks, Michelangelo? Only you can decide. In lieu of looking at Michelangelo and Chun-Li, I've been practicing my spinning bird kick. The only thing that's resulted in all this is I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. Before we get a closer look at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles versus Street Fighter, I really don't have an appointment tomorrow. I fell the first time and just gave up on it. Before, though, we get a closer look at Michelangelo and Chun-Li, I'd like to thank the folks over at Playmates Toys that did provide the samples that we're about to have a look at here. Grabbing the tape measure now just to see how tall Mikey stands. If I can get myself untwisted here, Michelangelo stands about 5.5 inches in height, or the figure's about 14 centimeters tall. Then on to Chun-Li, who is very noticeably taller than Mikey. You're looking at the figure in this case of Chun-Li being about 5 3/4 of an inch tall. And that works out to be a figure that's about 14 centimeters in height. When last we looked at this line, it was for Leonardo, and it was for Ryu, the other 2-pack that Playmates Toys had offered. I couldn't help but also notice on the front of the packaging where the characters are contained inside of their plastic tray, that on the left side were advertised Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Donatello in that order. And then on the other side was Ryu, Ken, Guile, and Chun-Li. I would only imagine by process of elimination, the fact that we have already looked at Ryu and Chun-Li, that perhaps the other 2 characters released in this set are Ken and Guile. If that's the case, we will certainly be looking at those guys in upcoming reviews. And of course, from there, we'll have at least 4 of the Turtle Brothers complete, and 4 characters from the Street Fighter franchise. Once again, for accessories, it only seems like the Turtles are the ones that come included with anything, as Michelangelo comes included with a pair of nunchucks. A pair. I know you're only seeing the one for right now. Chun-Li, like the Ryu before, doesn't come included with anything. Now, whereas I thought Ryu could have come included with a pair of relaxed hands to indicate or illustrate the Hadouken, I don't know what I would necessarily have included with Chun-Li. Maybe just a display stand so I could at least have one of her legs bent upward. Not really sure. But in this case, like I said, Michelangelo is the only one that comes included with stuff. Let's have a look at that stuff right now. As I did say, though, the figure comes included with a pair of nunchucks. Now, right now, you're only seeing just the one. The nunchucks are cast in black plastic, though connecting the two, you can see they're using a silver chain. I don't know if the chain has actually been painted or if they have found a way to actually mold this in silver plastic. Either way, though, this does fit into his hands. But like the problem I had with Leo before, they have actually articulated the fingers. The fingers are independently articulated, and you can also move the thumb inward, which does pose a problem when it comes to certainly getting the figure to properly hold their weapons. Sure enough, as quickly as you think you've got them gripping their weapon, the weapons do sits a little loose, unfortunately, in their grip. Now, while I do, again, appreciate the fact that they would have included articulated hands like this, I still feel like you would just have accomplished just as much if they had just included gripping hands instead. Like, see, again, like you could just grip it around the nunchuck. It sits okay, maybe sits a little bit better than the katana, but I think gripping hands probably would have just worked a lot better. Now, I did say, I promised that there were a pair, because if you look on the back, I've already taken the liberty of hanging up the jacket for the night. The other pair of nunchucks I've already slotted into the holster here on the back. If I just pop one out right now, go ahead and pull these out from the loops. They are a little harder to get in there, and probably one of the reasons why I left this one behind. You can see there's the loops on both the sides of the shell. You just take the nunchuck, we'll take then the one, and carefully fit it into those loops. So again, it's pretty tight quarters, so we're going to get one in, and we're going to leave it for now. Let's go ahead and take the other nunchuck out of his hand. Again, closer look now at Michelangelo. If you had seen the chance or had the chance to look at my other review of Leonardo, the thing I really liked about Leonardo happens to be the same thing I really like about Michelangelo. It's all this additional cross-stitching, the pen lines, in fact, that they've added to the surface here of Michelangelo's face and the rest of his body. It sort of gives it almost a comic book feel to it. And one of the reasons why I'm liking this line so far. Now, actually, I don't think they have yet released the Donatello and the Raphael, but I'm really excited to see what it's going to look like with the continued trend of using the black the way that they did. Now, like with the older toys, each of the turtles have their distinct color. Leonardo's here is actually more of a swamp-colored green, where Michelangelo's is more of a dark lime color. In both the cases, actually looks like they're using the same bodies. Same placement of wrist straps, same placement also of elbow pads, and it seems like the knees are in the exact same place, the knee pads, that is. What is a little bit different, though, is the bandolier that would have been on Leonardo is now gone completely when looking at Michelangelo, but they still have, like the classic toys, the L and the M to indicate Leonardo. Yes, you're right, and Michelangelo. Looking at the shells seem to be the same, while Michelangelo's, though, is a little bit lighter of the two. Actually, no, the more I look at it, yeah, okay. I thought perhaps they were slightly different shells, but I think what's just throwing me off is the scabbards that are in front of Leo's. Yeah, it looks to be the same shells, mostly the same molds, but very different looking head sculpts altogether. Where Leo had a big grimaced smile from one side of his face to the other, Mikey actually has kind of more of a smirk on his face, but still the broad, very bold use of the black lines does really do wonders for this figure line. I gotta say, it really does look good on Michelangelo here. Still has like the shorter bandana, so Leo's seems a little bit longer, but Michelangelo's has sort of parted in the middle and off to the sides. Again, I really like the coloring. The use of this black, while again, not something I thought I would really like, does actually do really good, like, just looks great on the figures themselves. You might say it's maybe too black, but I mean, it's, again, when you're looking at the shell, maybe there is a lot of generous black that's been added here. I mean, of course, they put all the little nooks and the little nicks and stuff that you would find normally on a comic page. They've added that as well. Maybe they could have pulled back just a little bit the outlining of the black that they've added around the shell, but still, I like it. I think they've done a really nice job on these. For the articulation here on Michelangelo, we're going to start, of course, with his head sculpt. Head rotates all the way around. Once again, like Leo, it does look up, and like Leo before, it looks down. And you can also rock it back and forth as well. I'm going to actually, in this case, for Michelangelo, I'm going to have his head slightly swayed to the side when I've got these guys displayed on the shelf. For the arms, they work the exact same way, so you can bring them out at a 90-degree angle bend. You can take then the same arms, you can rotate them all the way around. And in both the cases, you can also rotate the bicep back and forth, back and forth. Both sides of the body, of course, does have a double hinge on the elbow. Both sides of the body as well also rotate at the wrist. And both sides of the body also do have, again, independently articulated fingers. It's nice on paper. It's nice on paper that they articulated the fingers. But again, it's a little bit harder when it comes to the figure actually holding the weapons. Mikey, I think, of the two, holds his weapons just a little bit better. The legs, again, do split. Oh, of course, also we can't forget the fact that the figure does have upper torso articulation. Love the fact that they actually found a way to put that in there. So you can kind of have, a cool looking pose with Michelangelo telling Chun-Li to bring it. Anyways, though, for the legs are on ball joints. You can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. About 3/4 of the way up the thigh. There's a swivel cut, so you can rotate that all the way around. Figure does have a double hinge on the knee. And again, you've got the articulated feet that go also back and forth up and down this way. But you can also rock it back and forth. Periodically, though, even though it didn't happen that much with Leo, periodically as you are moving the feet back and forth, they do pop off the ball joint. But as you can see, pretty easy to put back into place. And again, you've got the toe articulation. Now again, the toe articulation, you can independently articulate each of the toes. I don't know why necessarily you would need to articulate toes independently, but at least you have that available. And like we had seen before when we looked at the Leonardo, it does really add for a lot of stability when it comes to these figures. They're really well balanced. They stand really well, and you can get them some pretty good looking poses. On to now Chun-Li. We're going to go ahead and pick the figure up right now. And for, again, the comparison, as we've already had a look at him, here's what she looks like along with Ryu. I think both the head sculpts are actually really quite good. And while I was a big fan of Ryu, I think Chun-Li has actually been handled quite well. She's very pretty in the face, as she certainly should be. You can see as well, she's got the panel lining around her eyes, slightly lighter than the darker eyebrows that they painted on top of her face, or a little higher up from her face. She's got a little earring there painted nicely there in the white. Lips cleanly applied. You know, again, like all the paint, you could say a little excessive on the turtle. I wouldn't say that. If you were to say it's excessive on the turtle, at least in both the cases, the paint has been applied really cleanly. I don't see a lot of paint bleed at all. Yellow would be certainly one thing to be looking out for if there was any bit of paint bleed, and I don't see it anywhere on Chun-Li's body. By the way, all of these little markings that she has on her suit are actually sculpted into the plastic. They didn't just, you know, outline it just in the paint alone. Even on their shoulders, she's actually got that sculpted in there as well. She has these spiked bracelets. They do sit a little loose. So if you, not that she does have swappable hands, but if you ever were to take the hands out, you would want to be careful that these don't fall off and onto the floor somewhere. I suppose they probably could have just permanently attached these to the forearms so that you wouldn't have any issues whatsoever if the bracelets were to fall off. They would just be permanently there. I mean, they're not obviously going to fall off because she has fists in place anyways. The front of the skirt is a softer plastic. The back skirting is also softer plastic. And because she does have the splits up the side, there's no real issue when it comes to the articulation on the figure. Very nice, bright shoes. Really isn't a lot of paint here on Chun-Li like the Ryu we looked at before. It seems like really all the budget for the paint went to the turtles. And you get a nice contrast, really. The lesser paint here on the Street Fighter characters, the more bolder lines and the more bolder paints applied to the turtles. For the articulation here on Chun-Li, once again, here's the face sculpt. Really happy with how this one turned out. Head sculpt isn't on ball joint. It's a little more limited, of course, because she does have the buns in her hair. When it comes to rotating her head, you're going to feel it right away. These are going to hit the sides of her shoulders. But still, you can rotate the head back and forth. You can have the head looking down and up. And again, you can also rock it back and forth. Shoulders, again, do come out at a 90-degree angle bend. Maybe a little less than 90, just because she's got so much extra sculpting happening here for the shoulder. But you can still take the arms and rotate them all the way around. Has a bicep swivel once again. Double hinge on the elbow. I love that these figures are as articulated and as posable as they are. Hands, again, rotate all the way around. Upper torso is just what seems only like a swivel joint. That's all you're getting here for Chun-Li. But legs do at least split out. You can take the legs and move them forward and back. And again, about 3/4 of the way up the thigh. I don't know why I had to make that sound. They do rotate all the way around. The figure does have a double hinge on the knee. And she does have some decent articulation in the feet. You can also, yes, ankle rock it back and forth. I mean, again, I would love to have gotten this guy. Now, Chun-Li, unfortunately, doesn't have peg holes on the undersides of her feet. Ryu, actually, didn't also have peg holes on the undersides of his feet. But I would like to maybe see if I can get myself like some sort of display stand, some way of actually having her maybe in a better pose where I'm not going to worry as much about the figure falling over. Now, you can compensate it. You can still get her in a pretty good standing pose where she isn't going to be falling over. That's the one thing I really like about this line, is that, yeah, you can get her in still decent poses, and the figure's pretty stable as well. And one last time, just again, straighten out the legs. Get her look a little bit presentable here. Let's once again bring back the other figures that we had a look at in the earlier review. Here's what, again, she looks like next to Ryu. And here's what she looks, or here's what Michelangelo looks like next to Leonardo. The only thing missing from this, I did actually check also online. There doesn't seem to be any whereabouts right now of the other two packs. That would be Raphael and Donatello. And again, if I was to base it from the packaging, I would assume at least it's going to be likely Guile and Ken. Those would be the other two packs. Super excited to have a look at those because, again, like how good they've done here with the approach of kind of really, really bold lines with the paint, the way they've painted Leonardo and Michelangelo. I like the look of those. And pulling it back a lot more when it comes to the Street Fighter characters, both the Ryu and now the Chun-Li that we've had a look at. Paint isn't the only thing I'm digging about this line. Don't get me wrong, like the paint on the turtles I like myself, but it's also the way they balance these figures too. Now, if you were to look at Chun-Li, of the two figures, she's the thinner frame figure, and yet I don't have any display stand whatsoever holding her upright. They have found a way to balance the figures with the articulation points in the knees and in the ankles, especially with the ankle rocker. I think that's crucial for getting Chun-Li to be balanced like this. She doesn't, granted, have any accessories. To be fair, though, neither did Ryu either. But, you know, she's a really pretty-looking Chun-Li. One of the better ones we've certainly seen. And then, of course, on to Michelangelo. Michelangelo, just as balanced as Chun-Li. He's got a lot more plastic to have to contend with. While he does have, again, some issues with him holding the nunchucks, he doesn't actually hold it as bad as Leo did with his katanas. Probably because the katanas were longer blade accessories. Michelangelo does, I think, a better job of holding his accessories. But I do wish, though, that they could have used gripping hands. I love the idea that they would have included and found a way to incorporate articulation in individual fingers and an individual thumb, but it comes almost at the price of having the figures having difficult time holding the proper accessories in their hands. But once again, even though there's much more plastic happening here for Michelangelo, because they put the articulation points in the ankles and in the knees where they had to put them, it makes for a really balanced looking figure. And likely I'm going to be having a lot of fun, I think, after, behind the scenes, when the cameras are all off, getting these guys' figures posed. Both the Leonardo that we looked at in the earlier review, and now the Michelangelo, I can have them displayed along with the Street Fighter characters of Ryu and Chun-Li. The idea of combining two things that I grew up playing a lot in the arcades. In fact, both the arcade games of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Street Fighter were actually at my local arcade store. And I talked about popping in quarters. I can't even imagine what arcades are like now. I think you probably have yourself like a points card. You probably fill it up on your card. Somebody can let me know down below. And then you're probably using that on the arcades. I still like to stick to the idea that an arcade back in my day were all quarters. I'd be popping in quarters for both the Ninja Turtle arcade game as well as the Street Fighter. Once again, though, we only have, I think, 2 of the 2 packs right now, the Leo and the Mikey. We are still needing to get the Raphael and the Donatello. I did actually, in between takes, look online. I don't know if there's actually a 2-pack release of either one of them yet, but judging again by the packaging that they've alluded to, they've also indicated images of both Guile and Ken. Safe to say, I think that those 2 characters are going to be paired along with the Raphael and the Donatello. The question is which turtle is going to be paired with, like, Guile. We'll only know again when we finally get those 2 packs. Once again, though, I'd like to thank the folks over at Playmates Toys that did provide the sample of the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Street Fighter collaboration that featured, in this case, Michelangelo and Chun-Li. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And maybe for your video question for today, what was your go-to arcades when you played them as a kid? And how much were those arcades? Some of you may even say they were worth $1 by the time that you guys were playing. But for me, growing up, an arcade was always $0.25. Didn't mean it was cheaper to play, by no means. I mean, I would probably easily go through $10 worth of quarters in about an hour. Some of the games I were a little bit better at. But yeah, what was the go-to arcades that you guys played with when you're going to your arcades when you're growing up? Let me know down below in the comment section. And as well, if you enjoyed this video, hit it with a like. If you're loving the content you're seeing and do want to certainly stick around for more, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and turn on the bell notification. And while, though, we've wrapped up the review right now for Michelangelo and Chun-Li, there'll be tons of other reviews coming your way in the not-so-distant future. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.